My man, here we go. Richard, what's going on, bro? Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me.
First time you saw someone reading your book or magazine, did you approach them and what'd you do?
Oh no. Trying to think of the first time. I think it was at the beach, and yeah, I just enjoyed the moment and went on my way.
It didn't give you like a cool rush. You see someone reading your book?
Absolutely, yeah. But I'm not a hey, that's me kind of guy, or is the book any good kind of guy.
Where are you calling me from?
I'm in Maryland, like half an hour north of Baltimore.
Are you all things Baltimore, Ravens, Orioles, Terps, or no?
Yeah, you know what? I graduated from University of Maryland, so a longtime Terps fan. But my youngest son is at University of Virginia right now playing lacrosse, so I'm a Cavalier right now.
I see you
And,
rocking the UVA hat. You know, my best friend went down there in 99 to '03, so I was down there 50 or 60 times. He played football. So it is a Charlottesville. Is it awesome down there or what? I love it.
I was gonna say it's a good spot. He's a lacrosse player, so yeah, they're always scooting around there in their scooters, and yeah, it's good food, good place.
Yeah, it's a great college town. Have you tried Little John's? It's that sandwich joint. Have you ever tried it?
Not yet, not yet. My mainstay is this Mexican restaurant, which I've been to. I think I've been to Charlottesville maybe a half dozen times, and I've eaten there 5 times. So.
Now, you've been around the horror crime writing scene for a while, but this is your first full-length novel. I put down quotations. What does that mean? Because what's the difference between that and what you usually do? I didn't know the difference.
Well, you know what? I've done a bunch of novellas, which are like, it's kind of a short novel kind of a thing. I did the second Gwendy book after writing the first one with Stephen King, Gwendy's Magic Feather. It says a novel on the front, which, is borderline true. It's technically it's a short novel, but I think that, Boogeyman was twice that length, and it was definitely a legit full length novel. And I just think they wanted to kind of have that added promotional aspect of saying, hey, this guy's been around for 30 something years, but this is his first real book.
Well, let's get to it. Best-selling, hopefully soon to be a Goodreads award-winning book, Chasing the Boogeyman. Congratulations on this success. And when did you know the book was a hit? Like, was there a tweet or what made you be like, okay, this book has it? Because you knew it blew up right away.
It was when it debuted on the New York Times list at 10. We worked really hard on promotion, and it kind of everything was there. It had a nice buzz. It had the blurbs from people like Stephen King and Harlan Coben, so things were trending in a really positive way. But it's really hard to hit that New York Times list these days unless you are like Reese Witherspoon or somebody's big book club picked you, or you're one of the big guys like a Harlan Coben or a Stephen King. So yeah, once it debuted there, I kind of realized, okay, this is good. And then it started getting more printings. It went into a second printing before publication, so I knew that was a good sign. Mm-hmm. And then during that first month of publication, my editor would email and say, hey, we're going in a third printing, and then we went into a fourth printing. So yeah. I mean, it was just a cool ride, getting to experience all that.
Early on, now you've had success before, but this is your big blow up. Early on, you're reading any reviews? You seen what people are writing about it?
You know what? Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've got thick skin, and a lot of writers say that, and they're full of shit. But I come from, I honestly think it comes from being a former athlete where, even on a good day, you're used to getting your butt chewed up by coaches and so that kind of thing. So, yeah. And plus the other thing is because of Cemetery Dance, because of my publishing company, I've been on the other side of the editorial desk for a long time. So I kind of have that insight where, I would publish an issue of our magazine, or I'd publish, someone else's new book, and I would get all kinds of, positive responses to it. At the exact same time that they were coming in, I would get all kinds of negative responses. My favorite story in the issue is blank. And then I'd have 5 more people saying, I love this issue except for blank story. It's tough, So it's such a subjective thing. No feelings hurt from me. So, yeah, I was glancing, the Simon Schuster really pushes Goodreads promotions. And so, you're looking at those early Goodreads that come in, and Goodreads is tough, man. It's like being a you kind of have to have like a boxer mentality where you're going to take a lot of punches, no matter what, no matter how successful the. And so that kind of prepared me, as well as everything I just said. So yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And at the same time, there are plenty of negative, comments. And we ran a lot of ads on Facebook, so I got a kick out of reading the comments to my family members. We'd be sitting there watching football or something, and I'm like, Chasing the Boogeyman is the best book I've read in the last 3 years. Next, Chasing the Boogeyman does not live up to the hype. I couldn't even finish it. So yeah, it's just part of the process.
I'm gonna echo what so many people have said and posted and tweeted about. I legit Googled 3 or 4 times during the book, was it nonfiction? It read so differently than everything else I read. Is that like the ultimate compliment for you?
Yeah, it really is, and that was my intention. When I sent this to my agent, I told her I want to Blair Witch the audience. I want them just like that film back there where people believed it was real and they had a background documentary and supporting material. My original intention was to try to pass this off as a real thing, and I planned, as a matter of fact, the original title was The Boogeyman: A True Story of Small Town Terror.
Okay.
And I planned on having like a 1990s era website designed and planting it online. I planned on planting several fake newspaper articles, an early version of like a blog and all that stuff, and then have it look like it just all dropped off at some point. But yeah, Simon Schuster's lawyers were not crazy about that idea. And I should have known early on. My oldest son, who's also a writer and a filmmaker, and he's 22 at the time, and he's usually kind of a fly-by-the-hip kind of guy. And as I'm progressing on writing this book and talking to him about it, he's like, Dad, you can't do that. You're like going to drive property values down in Edgewood, and you're going to have people scared and wondering if the murders happened in their yard. And so he ended up loving the fact that he was right and Dad was wrong. So yeah, they made sure they put a novel on the front and have a disclaimer page in the front that essentially said, hey, this is, although there are some real, there's some real stuff in here, most of it's from the author's imagination. And I actually didn't want to write that, so they wrote it for me. But yeah, I mean, it is a compliment. And that was the point of having the photographs at the back of every chapter. Instead of even having them like in true crime books, most of the time they're in one central section of the book. I wanted at the end of every chapter the reader to get this visual reinforcement of what they had just read. And my hope was that by chapter 5 or 6, no matter what it said on the front of the book about it being fiction, seeing these pictures and reading the words would all just kind of pile on top of each other and convince them that they were reading a real story.
Now, but the book is kind of based on a true story, right? I think it's called The Phantom Fondler Terrorized Your Neighborhood for a Decade, right? So it's kind of based loosely on a true story?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the catalyst for like I said, everything that happened except for the murders, everything that I cover in the book is mostly true. I really did move back to my parents' house after, graduation for 9 months and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. And that was when the Phantom Fondler, he was, sneaking in people's houses at night and touching women, on their hair, their legs, and excuse me, they'd wake up and he'd take off. And what's interesting is I knew this happened. I remember how the town reacted to it, which is very similar to in the book. What I didn't remember is I thought this thing probably happened 3 or 4 or 5 times. Usually you blow it up the other way, in your memory, it gets bigger. But what happened is it got smaller because when I went back and researched everything, I realized that this guy had done this over 30 times and had never been caught. And I was like, wow. He was arrested later in Baltimore City for an unrelated crime, and he admitted to everything, and the evidence matched up. But yeah, I 30 times that he did this in our community and was never caught is terrifying.
I want to give you more props because New York City guy. Now you're a Baltimore guy. You grew up in a small town of Edgewood. The beginning of the book, you spoke in meticulous detail about Edgewood. And I'm turning the pages, and if you would have told me the first 20, 25 pages is about a small town, I would have wanted to blow through it. You did something that not many people can do, and it's ultimate props. It's ultimate kissing your ass. You made a city boy wanted to read more about this small town. Dude, that was like the perfect description. And you put the reader in Edgewood. You really did, man.
Thank you. You know, what's funny is we were talking about, the reviews, and most of the negative ones keyed in on the fact that that it was a slow start. Either that or who the hell's this Chismar guy? Why does he think we're so interested in his background? Which I laughed because, editorially, it was something that my editor, Ed Schlesinger, who's great and did a fantastic job on the book, that he did bring up. Do you feel like you should shorten this, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, I said, no, I said, because here's what I did is I'm a big true crime fan. And I modeled it, I structured it after a lot of the true crime books that I really enjoyed. And what they did is they kind of established place and the person's background who was writing the book and how they connected everything before they got to the murders or the disappearances or whatever it was in that particular book. And I always liked that. I always felt like it was really important to give the reader that sense of place and time and character before we got to the other stuff, and which is the most significant stuff is, about the crimes and the victims. And I just, especially with this one, because the book was so much about the loss of innocence, not only for me but for my small town, which was my world until until you go away for college. It was my entire universe, pretty much. So I appreciate you saying that, because I had a chance to kind of cut that back, and I was like, no, you know what? I said, number one is fun. I get to write about all my buddies and growing up, and all the stuff's true, and the stuff I left out, people would just be aghast. But it was a typical boys growing up, back before cell phones and video games, and we were just out getting into mischief. And I can't tell you how many people I heard from saying, "Oh my God, I had the same, experience throwing stuff at cars." And I'm like, I'm glad I'm not alone. The shame is real, but I had to put that in there because it was such a significant part of growing up on Hanson Road. It's just like, it wasn't a normal summer day unless you like plucked one car with a crab apple or something. Nowadays you get shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing that book, doing the outline, did you know all along you were going to make yourself the central character and the main character of the book?
No, I mean, that is so out of character for me. And again, I remember my agent's reaction when I sent it, because she knows she's always trying to get me to go to a book conference or this convention. And I'm like, you know what? I like my house and I like my little pond and catching my fish and not going anywhere. So I'm very much a behind the scenes guy. And to send her this book, which she didn't even know I was writing, because it was such a strange thing that I didn't want anyone to talk me out of it. I was like, I want to write this book. And that's what I told my son when he was fretting about that stuff. I'm like, Billy, we don't even know if 5 people will read this, or 500 or 5,000. I said, it's such a weird idea. But so, no, I didn't know. I just remember when I told her and she was like, okay. But yeah, what happened is I sat down and I started writing the introduction, and I realized, you know what? I can't fake this. This is me. This is my story. And it went hand in hand with the true crime idea, which was why invent somebody? So I thought, you know what? I'm going to write this as if this really happened to me back when I was 22. I said, hey, I was a young writer too. So if I'm a little sloppy in places, all I have to say is, look, I was 22. The only thing I wrote now was the afterword about the ultimate solving of the crime. But yeah, it like probably 3 or 4 pages in, I was like, you know what? I'm not a good enough writer to fake this. This has got to be me. So I'm going to write this about me and see what happens. And she did ask, after she read it, she said, you really won me over. She said, I do have this question. If a publisher really wants this, but they want to change it to, a fictional narrator, would you be open to that? And I said, I guess it just totally depends on what the deal was and the reasoning there. And I said, but I understand it's weird. I said, let's just see what happens. And fortunately, Simon & Schuster, they had the same response that she did in the beginning, which was okay. And then they said I won them over too. So I felt good early on that it at least had gotten past those first few hurdles, and nobody had said, why does Chismar think he's so important that they want to read 300 pages about him?
You're open saying it's nonfiction and fiction, kind of goes in. Is it difficult to toe the line? Obviously it's a fiction book with some true stuff. Is it difficult to make sure it's believable but not like crazy and stuff? Was it weird to intersect them?
You know what? What I tried to do is I tried to write the most honest story I could. And that's like, some people have said, did you embellish on the real memories? And I'm like, no, man, because the memories were good enough. They were, and they felt kind of sacred to me. I didn't want I felt like I was representing myself and all the guys I grew up with, and like I said, they were good enough stories. You know, the first time I saw a bra was a chick wrecking on her, you know, on my buddy's bicycle, and you know, things like that. And so and then the stuff that didn't really happen, you know, regarding the murders and how I would react to them. I tried to be honest. I tried to project myself back as that 22-year-old, because I do remember it happening, and me, because I had this background in horror fiction and crime and mystery suspense, and I read a lot of, you know, early true crime books even then. You know, I was waiting for things to escalate. You know, I'd read a lot of stuff about serial killers, and I felt like if this guy is doing this, you know, at some point it's going to escalate to a physical, you know, more than just caressing them, which is bad enough. So I don't mean to downplay it, but it's going to lead to rape or possibly murder or something. And I wasn't hoping that it happened, but at the same time, because of the world that I was growing up in, as far as being a writer and a editor in the horror, you know, suspense field, you still can't help but feel, you know, and it's hard to put into words, and I try to portray that in the book. You know, you're not excited. You're not like one of the weather guys, you know, talking about the incoming hurricane, and they're like practically tap dancing because here it comes. But at the same time, you can't deny the fascination that's there, and that's kind of what I tried to do. Is just I tried to, even when it was not very flattering to myself, I tried to be as honest as I could, and that's why I liked Carly Albright. She was kind of balanced me, and she was kind of the one saying, "Hey, you schmuck, you know, not all these guys are Hannibal Lecter."
Yeah, she kept you in check.
Yeah, and that's why that is just. But that was what I disappointed people about the most, I think, at the end of the book, is that there was no Carly Albright. She was kind of a combination of several people I knew, but so many people were like, I just want to meet Carly, and I'm like, oh. So yeah, if there's ever a movie, that's the role I'm most looking forward to being cast.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned movie, because for me, it had a small touch of Scream. It had a curfew, murder, small town, everyone's a victim. Did that play any part of, like, while you're writing it, like, okay, this is kind of a Scream thing, a small town, or that might happen in any small town?
Not until I was finished. You know, I really thought of it as a little bit of like Halloween, because you don't really the stuff happens off screen. Mm-hmm. And that's one of my favorite horror movies, or maybe my all-time favorite. I feel like it's such a simple story told so well. And for a long time, that's what I said. I said, you know, because you start getting so much buzz and you get a little nervous. And I remember telling people, I'm like, you know, Boogeyman, it's really just like this campfire story. It's just, I used to be that kid who'd tell the stories and scare my friends. And this is just kind of like the grown-up version of me and my buddies all sitting around a bonfire having a drink, and me trying to scare them as grown-ups. And I said it's a very small story in a lot of ways. It's all centered in this little town, and it's one guy's version. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, I'm like, I listened to a lot of Bruce Springsteen when I was writing it. It was that kind of Americana thing. And so, yeah, I didn't really think of it as anything when I was writing it, other than just this very personal story. And then once I realized, you know, how the town reacted, and like you said, curfews and all that, you're 100% right, because Scream is immediately what I went into. I said, you know what? I kind of wrote a combination of Scream and Halloween and I'll Be Gone in the Dark, you know, the Michelle McNamara true crime book. And I was like, I didn't mean to. And I threw a little Stephen King flavoring in there, and I didn't even mean to do that. You know, I remember I texted him and I said, you know, dude, I realized after the fact that I put a hopscotch grid in this story I'm writing, in this book I'm writing, and you have a hopscotch grid in Hearts in Atlantis. And I'm like, so it's obviously it was this subconscious, you know, kind of, you know, you know, trying to, you know, just, you know, honor yours. And I said, but I'll take it out if you want me to. He's like, no, that's cool as hell. Leave it in. So, yeah, it's just funny because I wish I could go back and say, you know, yeah, I was really smart from the beginning and kind of did a little of this, but I didn't. I just really wrote the story I wanted to write, and it came together. So that was the cool thing.
Chasing the Boogeyman, we're talking murder, small town. You're the lead guy. Give the synopsis of the book. We gave everyone the full background. Just give the meat and potatoes of what the book is.
Essentially, it's about 22-year-old me who just graduated from the University of Maryland with a journalism degree, with no intentions of using it because he inexplicably started a little horror magazine his senior year in college called Cemetery Dance. So I'm engaged to get married in about 9 months. My fiance and I decide, hey, I'm going to move home for 9 months and save money instead of going out and getting an apartment now and paying rent because we're young and poor. And I'm just going to work on my magazine, and I'm going to write my stories and send them out to other magazines and just try to make this crazy dream work. And so I moved back to my hometown, to the bedroom I grew up in, and it's just a really interesting dynamic there because I am standing on that threshold of adulthood, about to be married and living out on my own, but I'm living in my old bedroom and I'm staring out my window. And how I described it was I'm every day I'm seeing the ghosts of my childhood out there. And while all this is happening, I'm working on my horror magazine, writing my scary stories. There's actually someone in town doing bad things, and the town is kind of losing their mind and turning on each other. And there's neighborhood watch programs and all this other stuff. And I get involved in the story, firsthand. So that's kind of the synopsis. It's always difficult to put in a sentence or two. It sounds ridiculous, but it's and everything up to the murders occur is pretty much true.
Well, let's talk about Cemetery Dance. You started that in '88 while you're in school. How'd that idea come about? Because that's a bold move. Now everyone can throw a blog on and stuff. You started a magazine. That's pretty wild. So how'd that come about? And what was your end game with that? Did you always know, okay, do you have a backup plan? If that's my answer. So you start Cemetery Dance. Why, how, and what was your backup plan if that didn't go through?
No backup plan at all. I tell people all the time I was young and dumb enough to believe that I could make it work.
Wow.
And great combination, because I had always kind of, and again, it kind of ties back from Edgewood. We were a working class town. Not a lot of country club dads. My dad was an aircraft mechanic, retired from the Air Force, and so there was a really strong work ethic, and that sense of, you kind of just do the work, and good things will happen, and it might not happen right away. You don't know, but if you keep doing it, you're going to outlast a lot of people, and that's kind of how I was raised. And I was selling short stories during my senior year of college to other magazines. I had started writing again after a break because I played lacrosse in college, and so I was more interested in sports and partying. And then I got hurt and got out of the game, and I got back into writing, and because of Stephen King's work, I just, I felt that really strong connection, and I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. And I was selling to these places, and I was getting acceptances and a ton of rejections. So I was feeling like, a legit, burgeoning writer here. And what happened is I would get the contributor copies usually with a check for like $8 or something. You didn't get much money then. And I would say about half the publications I was really proud to show to family and friends and say, hey, look, I've got a story in this. And then the other half were just horrible. They were stapled together. The artwork looked like I had drawn it, stick figures, pretty much. And I remember throwing those in a drawer and thinking, man, I could do better than that. So there was a magazine called The Horror Show. I found out it was a one-man show. This guy, David Silva, out in California, was doing it. And he had stories by lots of people and columns and interviews. And I was just blown. As a matter, well, it's not on screen, but I've got a copy sitting right here from way back in the day. Oh,
that's badass. That's cool.
Yeah. I actually posted pictures on social media the other day, and I said, without this magazine, there would be no Cemetery Dance, because I remember the moment I found out that he did everything as far as editing, proofreading, design, sold ads, did that whole thing by himself in this trailer in the mountains of California. So that's all it took for an Edgewood guy. I was like, well, shit, if he can do it, I can do it. So yeah, that's how it started. If he can do it, I can do it. And so I published my first issue, which is described in Chasing the Boogeyman. And my roommate at the time did all the artwork for it, and it was just a slow process, and it built and built. And I tell people all the time now, because they ask for advice, and I was like, look, I don't know if you want my advice. I made no money in my 20s. I'm like, I worked my rear end off, 70, 80 hour weeks longer, the whole thing, and tons of discouraging times. But there was always enough positivity there and enough successes that I could build on it. And again, I'd like to look back and say I was this brilliant business mind, and my end game was always to do this, this, and this. But there was no how-to book, so I was just, it's something I tell my sons. I'm like, I've never done things the easy way, but what I have done is just done them in such a way that it's what I've done, whatever's necessary to get to the next point. And no matter how small, I used to cover just any small marketing thing, back then before the internet, and then when the internet just started, anything I could do. I was the philosopher. I always use the comparison. I said, when I was a kid growing up on Hanson Road, I sold lemonade out at the corner of Hanson and Tupelo, and I said that's still how I look at selling books. Is every book you sell counts. Every book you sell is a cup of that lemonade, and it all adds up. And so yeah, that's no brilliant end game. Just a kid who was kind of just bulldozing through it and making tons of mistakes.
Do you remember your first story?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's where Cemetery Dance came from. It was the first story I sold. It was not the first story I published, because some places took longer. But I sold some, and I thought it was a cursed story because I sold it twice, and both those magazines folded before they published it. But what I remember is the editor's response to that story. I think they liked the title more than they liked the story itself, because it was kind of evocative. So when it came time to name the magazine, the first title was Night Chills. And I still have a mock-up somewhere that somebody drew of the cover, and it says Night Chills across the front and all that. It's probably worth a couple of dollars, but I remember, asking for feedback. I said, well, a lot of things with night in the title and a lot of things with chills in the title. Maybe you should just try to come out of the gate and be more original. And kind of something that's a catchier. And I remember Cemetery Dance. Everyone commented on the title, and I was like, well, let's do Cemetery Dance. So then I spent like the next 5 years explaining what the hell Cemetery Dance was to every bank, teller at my bank, and at the post office, to every single clerk at the desk, and at Kinko's. I still remember at University of Maryland doing flyers. And somebody's like, "Are you throwing a rave out in cemetery?" I'm like, no, nothing nearly that cool, man. I'm like, I'm a book nerd. My rave days are over.
Now, how'd you get linked up with Stephen King? Because you drop his name casually. You guys are buddies. How'd you link up with him, and how young were you when you guys first connected?
Well, right from the get-go, like being like 22 or whatever, I sent him the first issue of the magazine up in Maine, and then. I sent him the second issue. I sent him the third issue. Just everything we did. Eventually we got into books. I sent him a copy of every book. And I'm sure with letters saying, you're my literary hero. You're the reason I'm doing this. And it was true. In 10th grade in high school, we read one of his stories out loud in class. And I had that kind of awakening where it felt like a door was opened. And I was like, I want to do this. And then, of course, I was into lacrosse and girls and parties. And so you kind of, I want to do this maybe one day. And then when I got hurt from lacrosse, I remember being really lost because it was kind of my identity. I played for, high school, college, and I was good at it, and it's what people knew me as. And I remember feeling really lost, and that's when It came out in hardcover, the big doorstop book. And I read this book, and it reminded me that this is what I was supposed to be doing. It was just, I tell people that, and I'm like, no, I'm not making it up to make it sound good. I'm not, being overly dramatic. It's just by the time I was finished with the book, I felt I wasn't lost anymore. And I kind of felt like, okay, I found my roadmap back. And I started writing for the school newspaper, actually writing sports, and then started writing fiction again. And so, yeah, I'm sure I told him all those stories. And then at some point he sent me a nice blurb for the magazine saying, hey, Cemetery Dance is one of the best. I read it as soon as it comes in. And then he sent me an original short story for Cemetery Dance number 14. And that was like 3 years into the business. So it came pretty quickly. And then that led to, like I started doing books later that year in 91. And I think it was around 2000, he sent me, his assistant sent me a manuscript copy of From a Buick 8, which is about, police officers in Pennsylvania up in Amish country. And it's just a wonderful book. And he said, you want to do a limited edition? So that was the first. And then spent the next years doing a lot of publishing deals with him and developing a really strong business relationship. And then at some point that turned into a friendship. You know, there's not a lot of big sports fans in the writing world.
I know.
Every Super Bowl time, you always get, you know, all these posts on social media. What is this big game everyone's talking about? And some of them are being sarcastic, and a lot of them aren't. So yeah, the fact that we were both big baseball fans and family guys, you know, people always say, "Well, what did you guys talk about in the beginning?" And I'm like, you know, our families, our dogs, baseball. He's Red Sox. I'm Orioles. Every once so a lot of movies and other people's books. We didn't talk writing, you know, about our stuff at all. But it just became a friendship and something that I felt very fortunate to have.
I have a ton of athletes on, and I'm going to ask you kind of the same question. The first time guys go in the locker room, no matter how good they were in high school and college, you're standing with the greats. So the first time you're collaborating with King, isn't it weird or intimidating as you get his let me make an edit on this. Is it weird editing it and then like sending it back to him?
Oh, no, the entire process is just, you know, I've been asked that question a lot, obviously, because it's Stephen King.
Yeah.
And especially because it's Stephen King in so many ways. It's not just Stephen King, the world's best-selling author and all these other things, but it's Stephen King who I essentially had a copy of, you know, I essentially had a paperback of one of his books in my back pocket, you know, growing up every summer. So it's like that personal connection is magnified so much. Yeah, I mean, it's still, I look back at it and I'm like, it's ridiculous that I've written a couple books with Stephen King. I've got no other explanation to say. It's ridiculous. It's wonderful. When I did press for the first book, I always, the line that ended up coming out repeatedly, because it captured the honesty of it so much, was I've always been a huge dreamer, but I never dreamt that big. You know, I'm sure in the beginning I dreamt maybe one day I'll publish Stephen King. Mm-hmm. Maybe one day I'll see an email with his name on it and he'll say, "Hey, Rich, why don't you do this?" But no way in any shape or form did I ever dream that we would write something together. And I'd be so, you know, have such an inside view of his process and his generosity and his talent and all that stuff is essentially sitting next to him almost at a word processor. So yeah, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. It's wonderful. It's such a gift. So that's how I look at it. And I was terrified in the beginning. I was so excited when it was like, "Hey, let's do this." And then I didn't tell anyone in my family. I found out on a Friday we're gonna, I was like, "You sure you want to try this?" He's like, "Yeah, give it a week." I didn't tell anyone in my family that entire weekend because and we're a tight family, man. We talk about everything, but it wouldn't come out. And then that Sunday evening, I remember we were just all sitting around watching something on television, and I was like, "Guys, guess what? I'm going to collaborate with Stephen King," and everything. It was just like in a movie. Everything kind of went quiet, and they looked at me like, "What?" I'm like, "I know." Because by then the excitement had turned into kind of, how the hell are you going to do this? And then Monday when I sat down to write, it stared me in the face. And I remember my hand was shaking and I was like, "Rich, this is stupid." And I just opened my laptop and I started writing, and it's like within an hour I was in Castle Rock, Maine, and all the nerves had gone, and I whipped out a huge part of the story like in the next 3 days. And I remember I just emailed it to him because I said, if I sit here and I try to nitpick and make it perfect, I'm never going to send it to him. So it was a case of just being, I wasn't young and dumb, but I was old and still dumb enough to think I could do it. And yeah, so that's a long-winded way of saying, I still have no idea how it happened. I still have no idea how I did it, but it'll always be something I'm most grateful for, the experience.
Now, how'd you get linked up with James Renner? I love James Renner. He's been on the podcast before. We talk a lot. How'd you get linked up with him?
You know what? I read. I'm trying to think. The first one I read from him, it was True. I think it was True Crime Addict.
Oh, amazing book. Okay.
Yeah. And see, and that's the thing. I've talked a lot about true crime because of Boogeyman, and I have such respect for the people who do that and do it well. I've read some true crime books where I'm just like, they should take this author out behind the shed and whoop his butt because he didn't treat the subject with enough respect, or he just, is sloppy, blah, blah, blah. James and some of the other guys who I really, that Michelle McNamara book, I just, you could see I've always told people, I've always felt like I probably have a true crime book in me, because I do like research, and I feel like I would, break my back to do the subject justice and the people who are involved. And I really respect that about people like James. It's just, you can see they put their heart and soul in there, sometimes to their own detriment, to get the story right. And, Boogeyman was kind of my way of doing that, but without, doing all the hard work of the research and dealing with the survivors and the friends. I was able to make that stuff up. So yeah, I read True Crime Addict, and then I immediately do what, anytime I find an author I really like is I get online and get what else they have. So he was just someone who I really, really respected. And then he was one of my first calls when he's the only person I asked for a forward for the book. But he was one of the first people who I actually picked up the phone and told him about the project, because I wanted to involve him in my madness. And I remember I told him, and he's like, I said, James, tell me honestly. I said, because I can count the people on one hand who know about this, and they're all related to me. I said, so and don't worry, you're not going to talk me out of it. I said, so if you think it's a ridiculous idea, it's okay. And I said, but I would just and he's like, no, Rich, I think this is really smart. And, if you pull it off, it's going to be something new and something pretty exciting. So yeah, I was thrilled that he said yes. And he wrote his foreword to me fit perfectly with the book, because it was so full of these small details that added up, that made you think, well, there's no way he made this up.
Exactly, on the beach, under the table, yeah.
Yes, that it was like it balanced the table at a beach condo at Richardson, Maryland, which happens to be the state in which Chismar lives in. So when I read that, I just thought, wow. I said, this is perfect. And yeah, I'm really grateful to him for that.
Chasing the Boogeyman has an end, but it's so successful. Is there any chance of maybe more books, a prequel, or staying with the Boogeyman name and going on, or not really?
Yeah, you know what? That's actually, I'm going to write a sequel. So that's
awesome! Really,
it's coming next. I had no intentions of doing it. I had no intentions of kind of ending it. With like any good horror film where you have that sequel possibility. Mm-hmm. But I purposely in the interview at the end, where I interview, the killer, and he leaves some things open ended, and I didn't do that to leave the door open for a sequel. I did it because, in most cases, as they don't end up nice and neat with a bow tied, nice and tidy. There's usually questions that are still unanswered. And so I did that to try to, like I did with the rest of the book, to try to be as authentic as I could be. Because I didn't want this, this guy who had done all these things and kind of paralyzed this town to kind of just say, okay, here's everything you want to know. So, but that struck a chord with a lot of readers, and it struck a chord with me. It kind of echoed in the back of my head that, there's still more of this story to tell. And I don't even know all the answers myself, but that was kind of the fun of writing this book, is, they came as I wrote it. So I'm looking forward to it. And I feel like, it's going to be in present day with me at this age, obviously. And he's still incarcerated, but there's other things happening that, again, involve the schmuck named Richard Chismar. So, I actually told my agent, I said, I promise I'm never writing a book about myself again. I said, but I got to write this one. So, yeah, we're in the process now, working out a deal, and that's actually going to be the next book I write.
Ready to finish up with some quick hit questions?
Sure.
You and I are at a bar here in New York City. Not Stephen King, because we know that already. Who's the coolest cat in your phone that if you texted them, they would text you right back?
Oh man,
because King's a heavy name. I'm not going to lie. That's a big time name. Yeah.
No, you know what? I'm trying to. I'd have to look at my phone to tell you. That's the thing. I mean, I've done some movie stuff in the past, and through the book world, I've met some interesting people. So, and I'm not even trying to cop out here. And it's just like, who the hell would I say? Whether it be my buddy, I don't know. I grew up with this guy named John Sheck, who was a big actor out in Hollywood for years, and he's still out there working. And I know some country singers, Janet Kramer and some others. So it's like, hell, that's a shitty answer. I'm sorry.
Here we go. I have a lot of true crime writers on. What's your writing schedule? I know Eric Larson, Joseph Lombard, Harold Schechter. They're very OCD with their writing. Are you the same way?
Only when I'm into the story. You know,
Okay.
that's the thing. I have never been, and it's not a matter of discipline, but because of my job, you know, the editorial side, every day is a little bit different. Which is probably what has kept me in the game for 30 plus years, because I've never gotten bored or burnt out. So I've never been able to be that guy who wakes up, has his breakfast, writes for 4 hours, and then, you know, when I was younger, I wrote at night when everything was silent, and I'd go for a run or walk the dog, and it inspired me. You know, now I'm old and I can't do that anymore. But once I'm into the book, once it's got its hooks into me, I write all day, every day. And that's the thing. I kind of disappear from the world for 3 months. And fortunately, I'm a fast writer, so I can get that draft down, and I'm not rushing it. But it's just, I embarrass my kids, because you know, we'll all go out to dinner or lunch, and I take my laptop with me, because I'm like, you know, I might have to finish this. And
I might have a thought. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, people blow the horns at me because I have my laptop open on the center console and I'm writing a couple lines before I forget it. And yeah, I'm that guy. So it always, my wife will know when she has to repeat things, like instead of having to repeat them 2 or 3 times, she has to repeat them 5 or 6 to get through to me. She's like, he's in his writing world, and he's going to be worse for the next 3 months. So yeah, I wish I had a dedicated writing schedule, but it's wherever the story takes me.
One sporting event in history you wish you could have witnessed live.
Man, let's see. Probably. You know what? I would have liked to see the Ravens win the Super Bowl. There's a chance I was going to go and I didn't go. I've seen some cool things. I was there I had cancer when I was 29 and again when I was 30. And fortunately I came out of there in good shape. But I remember I went to Cal Ripken's streak tying game, and
wow.
Like a month off of chemo. I was skinny. I was still sprouting hair again. I was weak as shit. But I remember both of those games, you know, standing up for, you know, just for such a long time, applauding and being overwhelmed. And I've seen some other, prominent. I saw the last game at Memorial Stadium with my wife, freezing cold, and I had tears rolling down my face like a sap. So yeah, but probably seeing the Ravens win the Super Bowl would have been it for me.
Yeah, I'm a Giants fan, so that's probably the worst game I never want to see again.
Yeah, but you know what? You guys beat the Patriots, so
twice, so it evens out.
And I was like one of the few Tom Coughlin fans. I miss the guy. He reminded me a lot. He reminded me a lot of Edgewood dads, you know.
Just fiery and stuff, yeah.
Just fiery and old, but still look like he could kick your butt. And you just like, I'm not gonna mess with you. You've got old man strength and probably like mental telepathy stuff you can do. I always said if I played for Tom Coughlin, I would have been playing for the guy because I didn't want to disappoint him.
Last show you binge watched, or last show that you binge watched that you'd recommend for somebody?
Oh man, what's the Midnight Mass? You know,
actually, I watched it. It was pretty good.
Yeah, everybody talked about it and everybody loved it until it became too popular, and then you started getting all the negative posts.
It was good early on because no one knew about it. Then everyone hyped it up too much and they hated it.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually really enjoyed it, even with the long ass dialogue and the long speeches and stuff. I was kind of like, okay, he's doing this on purpose, and it's actually working for me. So yeah, I watched that with my son, and we really enjoyed it.
And finally, coolest piece of memorabilia you own and the coolest book you own, whether it's a first edition or an old book, coolest book and coolest piece of memorabilia.
The coolest book I own is probably it, because after I got to know Steve and was able to tell him that story of what it did for me. I just said, look, I'm going to be a fanboy if it's all right. I'm going to send you my copy that I read back there in college. And if you don't mind signing it to him, and he signed it with a really kind
awesome
description. So that's my favorite book. And then what was the other part? Memorabilia. You know what? Huge Oriole fan. I still have a baseball signed by all the 20-game winners back then when it was Palmer and McNally and Cuellar and Pat Dobson. That was one. And I did take that out. It was actually my dad got that for me. And typical, suburban growing up in the 70s stories, I did take that out because we didn't have a ball and I played with it in the side yard with my friends. So it's a little scuffed up. But, that's probably it. I'm not a huge, autograph guy or anything like that. But And I've got some memorabilia from movies, but you know what? Just I have so many memories of going to Memorial Stadium with my dad and parking a mile from the stadium because we could save in parking and leaving in the seventh damn inning so we could get to our car. So yeah.
And not that you need any more plugs, but plug the book, where they can buy it and where they can follow you on Twitter, because you're an awesome follow on Twitter.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm on Twitter under my name, Richard Chismar. And you can buy the book anywhere. That's the cool thing about Boogeyman and actually, it doing well is whether, you can walk into a Barnes & Noble or a Books A Million, or you can, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, any of those places. So. Yeah, it's a good Christmas gift, folks.
It sure is, Rich. Yo, this was a blast. Thank you so much for doing this. The book I couldn't recommend it enough, man. So thanks for doing this. I had a blast doing this. And go UVA, man. I'm rooting for you and your son down in UVA. Not the Orioles ever, so don't worry.
I know. Well, you know what? You can root for him. It doesn't matter now. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. I enjoyed this. All right, take care,
brother.
Thanks.
See you later. Bye-bye.